Welcome to the Colony Archive, a weekly review and analysis on the politics of empire and resistance. What is going to be the direction of New Syria? With the fall of the Syrian state, we're seeing a lot of different and shifting emotions. There's hope and joy, but also fear and uncertainty among ordinary Syrians, both in Syria and the diaspora.
Syrians have been calling this day Victory Friday and celebrated right across the country. A carnival atmosphere at Umayyad Square in Damascus.
The new Syria could take many different directions, but with the events of the past few weeks, it seems that an independent and plural Syrian state ruling over the territory of historical Syria, meaning its pre-2011 borders, is just not in sight. Many Syrians have rallied around Abu Muhammad Al-Jolani, formerly known as Ahmad al-Sharaa. He was a former Al-Qaeda fighter turned tie-wearing politician. Al-Jolani is a native Syrian who was first a member of Al-Qaeda and then joined its offshoot known as Al-Nusra Front. While a member of these groups, he participated in a foreign-assisted armed fight against the Syrian state. Syria, with the help from Russia, Iran, and Hezbollah, was able to maintain its hold on power, although not on the entire country. The province of Idlib, for example, was being controlled by the Al-Nusra Front. The Al-Nusra Front, merging with other Sunni militant groups, changes identity once more into the Council for the Liberation of the Levant. In Arabic, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which in English has come to be known as the HTS. With probable assistance from Turkey, the US, and Israel, in December, HTS was able to take over the areas controlled by the now-fallen Syrian state. It faced little resistance from the Syrian army, and the Syrian leader Bashar al-Assad fled the country to Moscow. Assad's old allies, Russia, Iran, and Hezbollah, seem not to have intervened a great deal this time. There are different theories as to why. Some say that Assad didn't invite his old allies to defend him. Others claims Iran just didn't have enough time to send in ground forces, and Hezbollah was too caught up in his fight against Israel to act. There are even more conspiratorial theories that Russia abandoned Syria, making a deal with the United States for its ouster. Now questions remain if HTS will build a sovereign and plural government which would respect the rights of religious and ethnic minorities and women. On sovereignty, hopes are already shattering. Israel has bombed Syria's defense infrastructure around 500 times so far. And Turkey and the US seem to have an interest in keeping Syria dependent and subservient to their demands. For example, Turkey has warned that the Kurdish YPG should be disarmed in Syria. Sure, this dependency might be followed by sanction relief and foreign investments, but whether these would actually regenerate Syria's economy or benefit its middle and working classes is still unclear. Notably, but perhaps unsurprisingly, the provisional government has not condemned Israel's destruction of the country's defenses. The governor of Damascus, Maher Marwan, even went so far to say that he wants to establish cordial ties with the same Israel that has been attacking Syria in the past weeks. Maybe new Syrian officials are playing 4D chess. Maybe they're hiding their true intentions in a very difficult political situation, as in HTS doesn't want to raise alarms with Israel and the US, and then tricking the US into providing sanction relief and investment. And once they're rich and strong, they would take a position against Zionism and US imperialism. But then, can you really bite the hand that feeds you? Also, HTS requested pro-Palestinian militants living in Syria to disarm. So the new Syria seems to be going out of its way to accommodate Zionist and Western demands, which sends an early message about the direction of the country's sovereignty. As a long-standing member of the axis of resistance, Syria would have been one of the last Arab states in anyone's prediction to normalize relations with Israel. But the new situation is forcing Syrians to give in to Israeli demands. There are basically two paths ahead for Syria when it comes to relations with Israel and the West. Either they submit to US and Israeli demands, which includes not only giving up territory and accepting normalization, but also lending support and legitimacy to Israel in its campaign to eradicate the Palestinian resistance. Or the Syrian people who have supported the Palestinian struggle throughout the decades rise up and choose to resist Israeli dictation of terms to their country. In the latter case, however, it would be very easy for the West to revive the terrorist label and keep the devastating sanctions on Syria. On the plurality of the new state, the Western media is claiming that HTS intends to form an inclusive and diversity-friendly government. They're even literally translating the English term inclusive into Arabic and Syrian context using words like dola shamila, which means an inclusive state. Of course, Syrians have their own history of inclusivity, having lived in a society with multiple religions in close proximity to the three continents of Asia, Africa, and Europe, and the cosmopolitan Mediterranean region. So they certainly don't need diversity, equity, and inclusion or DEI instructions from the West. However, it's unclear if HTS is interested in a pluralist state and society. The anti-Assad opposition has already desecrated the grave of Hafiz al-Assad, the father of Bashar, and there are reports of former officials being executed. These acts make you think that vengeance instead of plurality might be on the menu. There was also a viral video of a woman who wanted a photo with Jolani. Jolani instructed her to cover her hair. Later, she defended Jolani, saying that she respects his beliefs.
مساء الخير، كيفكن؟ بالبداية حابة إني أتشكركن على الدعم وعلى الكلمات الحلوة اللي وصلتني منكم. ثاني شيء أنا حابة إني أختصر قصة صورتي مع قائد الإدارة العامة حتى توصل بالشكل الصحيح. يا جماعة الموضوع صدفة. أنا بمنطقتي السكنية ماشي أنا وعائلتي ورفقاتي، بنلتقي صدفة بأخوتنا المجاهدين والقائد معهم. طلبنا صورة من القائد وبكل احترام هو وافق على طلبنا. طلب تغطية الرأس، انطلب بكل لطف أبوي، غيرة على بنات البلد، ومن حق القائد إنه يظهر بالصورة اللي بتناسبه. هذا كل الموضوع. عم نتنفس حرية، عم نعيش الحرية نحن وسعيدين. تحياتي لكم، وبتمنى إنه توصل الصورة صح ونأمل إنه نعمر هالبلد.
But then it's unclear how this random hijab enforcement would actually work. Do women have to have a piece of cloth in handy and putting it on every time they enter a government building or interact with someone of Jolani's persuasion, then being free to let their hair flow? It would be certainly a very bizarre and burdensome experience. What will happen to the religious minorities remains to be seen. So far, Christians seem to have celebrated Christmas in peace. But then once the temporary and fluid state turns into a permanent and fixed state, things might change. Also, whether HTS or other groups could even unite a fractured Syria into a single united country is in question. Now there's also the question of values. Here I'd like to make a comparison to the case of the Iranian Revolution in 1979. The value system behind the Iranian Revolution included anti-imperialism, Islamic unity, and socialist demands for worker welfare. But then things got complicated soon after the formation of the provisional government in 1979. Socialism was cast aside, and this left workers vulnerable. State-interpreted Shiism overwhelmed everything else. The only early value that remained was anti-imperialism. Now compare these values, which from our perspective are good values, with the not-so-great values of the Syrian rebels. The rebels thrived on opportunistic support from foreign and imperialist states, not to mention their sectarian tendencies. They also don't seem to have much of a discourse on workers' rights and welfare. If the rebels' foundational values aren't so good, the future might also be bleak. Because revolutions only get messier with time, and the most violent forces will often have the upper hand, without accommodating those they disagree with. Syrians were and continue to be in a difficult situation. They found themselves between an unpopular government, kept in power by foreign support, and an imperialist-funded international warfare, which took its fighting forces from sectarian Sunni militants. So contrary to the wishes of ultra-leftists in the West, a third camp is spearheading some sort of anarcho-libertarian utopia is just not in sight in Syria. It'll take time to build Syria on Syrians' own terms. But for now, the road to Syrian territorial integrity, sovereignty, and political pluralism seems long and hard.